get my 6. And in the meantime, I'm facing the opposite direction today because I'm not turning my back to these woods. I'm sitting here on the stump where I frequently sit and tell these creepy stories. The story today of which is quite creepy. I haven't been up here in a while. As you know, I've been lagging with my videos, been busy gardening and doing lots of other stuff. But sitting on this stump was this. What in the world is that from? But more importantly, what or who in the world left it on my stump? Is it a gift or is it a threat? I don't know, but like I said, I'm not turning my back to the forest. So, story time. I'll just get right to it. I know you've heard it said, careful what you wish for, you just might get it. It's kind of a story along those lines, in that having grown up always being a fan of all things macabre, be they Edgar Allan Poe short stories or Stephen King full-length novels or vampire movies that come on at midnight on TNT, unless if it's Christmas when they would relentlessly play It's a Wonderful Life. But as such, I always wanted to know what it would be like to live in a haunted house. And it took more than 40 years to finally find out, with this house in the backdrop here, my house, my family's house. So a lot of odd things have happened here, inside the house, outside on the property. Just saying, we've captured a lot of oddities on video. Well, I guess after about half a dozen years or so of this stuff going on, I finally determined and decided I was going to find out the history, or at least as much as I could, of every family or every individual that ever lived in this house. It's 120 years old next year. It's amazing. I mean, if you think right now as I sit here and tell this story, it's spring of 2022. We can go back 100 years to the spring of 1922. This house had been lived in for almost 20 years. There was somebody else right here doing something a century ago. Well, I've often wondered, who were these people? Where did they come from? Where did they go? What happened to them while they were here? What events transpired to cause so many of these oddities? Well, we know the Ballad of Jim Brown, for those of you who read October Nights, Part 1. Oh, just saying. We know all about Jim Brown. We know that the house originally was a sharecropper's house and some tragedies took place here. But after that, after it was no longer a sharecropper's house, what about the families then? Well, by talking to a lot of old timers around here, by researching courthouse records, doing tireless, never-ending searches on the internet, come up with, piece together some of the puzzle, but there's going to be quite a bit more to go, and I intend to share them with you as I add each piece to the puzzle. The piece that I've found comes into play shortly after the sharecroppers left. It would have been approximately a little more than 100 years ago, the 19-teens. There was still a lot of Irish immigration going on. A lot of folks from Ireland crossing the Atlantic, coming to the U.S. That took place heavily through the mid to late 1800s, through about 1920. This story involves a family who may have been the next to live in this house after the sharecroppers left, after those tragic events that happened to Jim Brown and old Jesco, or old Jessup, if you'll remember from October Nights. There was an Irishman who, when he came here, was of middle age. He was born poor in his homeland of Ireland there, but he wanted something different. He was known to be one of the hardest workers. He was intelligent, so not only did he work hard, he worked smart. And by the time he reached his 30th year, he had accumulated quite a bit of wealth. A self-made man who'd reached down and pulled himself up by his own bootstraps. Well, in his small community, the local, those among the affluent who were born into their wealth and who believe that that's how all wealthy people should be, born into it. How dare some miscreant from the lower socioeconomic classes feel that they have any right to work their way up the ladder of success and to achieve affluence by their own means. Some things haven't changed. But this guy did. And he was approached as a result by three of the most leading families of wealth and affluence in his part of Ireland. And they said, you know, we've been watching you toil away, and we laughed at you in the beginning when we saw you out here doing all the various businesses you were getting involved with and thinking you could be somebody, and we'd just laugh. And who is this guy? Well, you got us all. Turns out you made it. You've joined us, and we'd like to offer an extended hand and pull you on board the rest of the way. Well, the guy was flattered, as you might imagine, and he said, hey, I'm all in. What do I got to do? And they said, well, you know, we want to make you a business partner. We want to allow you to buy into, you know, based upon, you know, we've got some business ideas. We'll allow you to buy into a percentage of ownership based upon what you have. And this guy, you know, he wasn't a fool, but he acted a bit foolish and kind of saying, hey, I'll invest everything I've acquired in my lifetime because, you know, I know who you are and your family fortunes go back centuries. It's time for me to be the person that sets that legacy for my future generations. I'm in. I have this much money. And they said, great, give it to us. He did. Well, they were setting him up. They were setting him up for failure. It was like a Trojan horse operation. There were no business ideas. They took his money. They squandered it. They didn't understand business. They were born into money. And if the types that, you know, if it were taken from them, they'd probably starve. But they suckered him out of his wealth. They never gave him his money back. He tried to go through legal means to have it returned to him. But of course, you know, the side of the law is often on those who can pay the highest in attorney's fees. That's why it's called a legal system, not a justice system. There's not always justice. I had a lawyer tell me that years ago. Point is, he lost everything. And but he had a supportive family. His family of origin was very supportive. And his mother told him, said, you know, we could always go talk to my people and they can make it right. Now, by that, a lot of you might think, you know, revenge. Let's go get our clan of hillbilly redneck kinfolk from back in the mountains and come down here and stomp a mud hole in them silver spoon mouthed a-holes. But that's not what the mother meant, and the son knew it. You see, his mother came from a long line of darkness. Call it what you will. Wicca, witches, Satanism. They practiced the black arts. And the guy, he was in a bad spot. It was a moment of weakness, and he told his mother, I'm game, let's do it. So they went back into the hills from where they had originated there in Ireland, and talked to some of her family, some of her kinfolk, and a lot of the locals in that whole area were kind of into this thing. And they approached him and they said, we can return to you 10 times the wealth that you lost. You've just got to help us in the performance of a ritual. Halfway through the ritual, you will receive your wealth. It'll come back to you. But you must fulfill the entirety of the ritual at a later date, or it will all be taken away. And the guy says, hey, I've got nothing to lose because I've already lost it all. Let's do it. So they told him, you know, the next full moon is in 20 days. Be here. We'll take you to a sacred spot. You'll be instructed on exactly what to do, and we'll get this done. So he said, okay. He and his mother returned to their village. 20 days later, on the night of the full moon, they went back. It was pretty simple. He took note upon returning to the village of his mother's family of origin and a lot of the locals, that there was a beautiful young woman. Like I said, the guy was about 30. This young lady was 20 at most. Gorgeous. I mean, just the most beautiful woman he'd ever laid eyes on. And she was there to greet him with the village elders, and she took him by the hand, and she didn't really say much of anything to him. She just kind of consoled him and comforted him as he was instructed what to do. And he was just gazing into her eyes, admiring her beauty. And so when they were giving him instructions, he was just, yeah, you're right, healthy guy here. They gave him a club. They said, and you'll use this. That brought him back to his senses. And he said, use this for what? And they said, well, when the time comes and the sacrifice must be made, you just, use this and club it to death. And he's like, club what to death? And realizing that he's asking too many questions, the young damsel starts massaging his hands. Oh, you're under stress. Just don't be stressed. And he looks back over and he forgot about what he was even there, to do. So they go into the woods as darkness falls, and there's not a cloud in the sky. The full moon is bright, and the whole time they have some traditional Celtic music playing. They have a bonfire. They're dancing around the fire, and off from one side of the fire there's an altar, and he's standing by the altar with the club on the altar, and this beautiful girl, she's holding both of his hands now, and he's in love, and he's already determined that I don't know what this crazy stuff going on here tonight is all about, but when it's over, I'm going to ask this girl to marry me, even though I don't know her name. So at some point, they come up to him, and they ask him, ironically, exactly what it was he was thinking. He was saying, in pursuant to the way this ritual works, do you accept this fair maiden as your lover for life? And he's like, heck yeah. I mean, he doesn't even have to wait. He's like, yeah, I get her now, of course. And they're saying, okay, by entering into this contract, you take on her, you will receive your wealth, and you will do that which is required upon you to do at a date in the future, a date based upon a time frame from when this contract commences until conception of that which you must sacrifice. And he's like, yeah. And then he's like, wait a minute, what did they just say? And they flop this black bag up on the altar, and they scream, now. And he looks over at the girl, and she's screaming at him. She says, now, do it. And he just picks up the club, and he starts beating this black bag, and he beats it until it stops moving. And as it does, the music stops. The flame goes out in the fire. And just as we're seeing here today at this very moment, the clouds move in, they cover the moon, it begins to rain. And out of curiosity, he opens the bag. And when he realizes what he had done, he sees that this is a choice he made that he's going to regret for the rest of his life. What was in that bag? Well, it wasn't a lamb, and it wasn't a goat. It wasn't an animal. It was a human, a very small one. And I think you know exactly what I'm talking about. And the village elder approached him, and he says, in for a penny, in for a pound. You've sealed this contract, and upon however long it takes for you and your new wife to conceive, you'll have that much time after the birth of the child to do what you've done here tonight, or you are going to lose all of your wealth in its entirety, just like you've done before you came here begging us to give it back to you. And he was like, OMG, what have I done? He takes off running all the way back to the village, even though it's still night. He travels all the way back to where he lives. He gets there by sunup. When he gets there at sunup, there's a bunch of people there at his house, big crowd, and a lot of police officers. He's thinking, OMG, right again. I've been set up again. I did something terrible, and they're here to arrest me. They're going to hang me, from the gallows for this. Well, what was going on was that it turns out his business partners, the affluent people, the trust babies who had suckered him out of his self-made wealth because they just didn't like the idea that somebody had accumulated, a massive fortune by their own means rather than having been born into it. Seems that they were out there suckering some other people and they ended up suckering the wrong person. They had suckered somebody in law enforcement. Well, all bets were off then. So they had come to this 30-ish-year-old Irishman to let him know that his fortune had been returned to him. They had arrested the trust babies, and everybody that they had ripped off was being returned their funds. So he was given back his wealth in its entirety, and the police got it wrong. They gave him back more than had been originally taken from him to the tune of 10 times the original amount. And just as he was beginning to think, OMG, did this thing actually work? This curse, this ritual? He feels a tap on the shoulder. He turns around and it's that beautiful girl that he had been wed to in unholy matrimony the night before, saying, did you forget me? I didn't forget you. So now he's with this woman who's gorgeous, woman of his dreams, minus the whole Satanist part, and he's come into a fortune 10 times greater than he had lost. Well, his rational mind kicks in. He thinks there's no way any of that hocus pocus stuff actually worked. It's all just coincidence. But I better get out of here while the getting's good and none the same, in case they do ever find out about what happened back there in those woods on the night of that full moon. So he's making plans to leave. His new wife finds out about it, and she says, you're taking me with you because I'm not going to be the one that suffers the curse when you don't go through with your end of the deal. He says, okay, whatever. He's thinking, I'll deal with her later. He says, I'm going to America. We're on the next boat out of here. I don't care about any of this. We're getting as much cash as we can get. We're going over there. That's what he did. She came with him. Guess where they ended up living? Right here in this house. He brought enough money to get him started. He got into farming, and nobody viewed him as a threat. Farming was common here in Virginia a century ago. But he was actually quite good at it. He employed a bunch of the tricks and the tactics he used in Ireland, and over the period of about 4 or 5 years, 6 years, he was beginning to accumulate quite a bit of wealth again. And over time, he fell in love with this woman he had married, and he had every reason to believe that she had fallen in love with him. And after that 5th or 6th year or so, she let him know that she was with child. Well, this, of course, reminded him of the compact he had made with her people and his mother's people back there in that small village in remote Ireland. And he thought, well, maybe she's forgotten. And he celebrated, this is a good thing, we're going to have a kid, etc., etc., and she celebrated, yeah, we're going to have a kid, etc., etc. And she never said a thing to him about that ritual. And they had a baby, and it was a boy, and it was healthy, and they loved it, and it loved them, and things were great. 5 or 6 years into this child's life, he was healthy, and he was learning how to do things around here on the homestead. Now it was a farm back then. And 400 acres once. His property was all 400 acres. And, about 5 or 6 years into perfect life for this young kid, the woman approached the man one day, her husband, and says, the time has come, what we got to do. The next full moon's tonight, and it's going to happen. And he said, OMG, are you talking about, and he brings it up, and she says, yeah, that's how this works. And he says, we're not doing that. I don't know what in the heck that was that happened in those woods, but that's behind us. That's the past. He said, we've got a good life now. We've got each other. We're in love. We've got our son. He's healthy. We love him. He loves us. Get that nonsense out of your head. She says, no, I'm not getting that out of my head. And either you're going to do it like you did last time, or I'm going to do it. And he says, how in the world can you do such a thing like that to our child? And she said, easy, the same way you did it all those years ago to my child. He was like, what? And she said, yeah, that's the part of the contract I'd signed into when I went to these people for the same thing. I had a baby My husband had left me, broken and penniless, and I had to do that to get out of poverty, to get this. And if you don't do this, I will, because I'm not losing everything we have to go back to the way it was before. That's when this man realized beauty, certainly at least with her, was only skin deep. She knowingly let him sacrifice her firstborn to help get her out of her problems, which also got him out of his problem. And now he was supposed to do the same thing to his own flesh and blood, her flesh and blood as well, which she'd obviously and easily done before, so that they could continue to have the good life. He wasn't going to do it. He refused to do it. And she said, if you won't, I will. And she stormed out of the house. And he thought, well, she's just angry. There's no way she would do that. Well, fast forward just a few hours. Darkness fell. Kid was asleep. Husband and wife went to sleep. At least that's what they both thought. Till around midnight, when the husband, sleeping with one eye open and both ears, heard the squeaking of the mattress as his wife slipped out of bed. And she started heading downstairs where the babe slept. So he got up and he followed her. He saw that she'd gone into the kitchen and she'd gotten the biggest, sharpest knife they had. And just as she ran into the room to do the unthinkable to the child, he stopped her and he grabbed her. And a fight ensued, a great struggle. And he took the knife and he drove it deep into her beautiful chest. She ceased to exist among the living. And as she did, he turned over and saw the child in the bed. And at that very moment, the child turned into a swarm, a giant horde of black flies that began circulating like a tornado's funnel and went up the stairs and into the attic, this very attic. Seeing that he had killed his wife and lost his son regardless due to his breach of contract, he used that knife to take his own life. That horde of flies lays dormant in the attic still, but it comes out of dormancy every so many years. And the things that have happened in this house during those times when that great horde of black flies come out of dormancy, those are the stories I'll be bringing you as I find more pieces of the puzzle of all the events that have taken place in the 120-year history of this darkly and deeply haunted house. See you for more next time.